Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine is responding and will continue to respond to Russian terrorist attacks. The president reported that the armed forces of Ukraine have successfully used long-range Neptunes against targets in Russia and published a video showing the effective work of this long-range modification of the cruise missile. Zelensky did not specify which targets were hit, but for the first time showed a video of the weapon being launched from the upgraded platform. Let me remind you that the warhead mass of the improved Neptune is 260 kilograms. That's 100 more than the anti-ship modification. Its range is about 1,000 kilometers.
Last night, our soldiers successfully used long-range Neptunes against specific targets on Russian territory, and this is our entirely justified response to the ongoing Russian terror. Ukrainian missiles are delivering increasingly tangible and precise results almost every month. I thank everyone who works on our missile program and gives Ukraine this accuracy and long-range capability. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, Telegram.
The main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine carried out a sabotage operation on the Trans-Siberian Railway. Weapons from North Korea, among other things, were being delivered to Russia via this route. As the intelligence officers noted, the explosion occurred on November 13th near the settlement of Sosnovka in Russia's Khabarovsk Krai. As a result, freight traffic was blocked, a freight train derailed, and the railway tracks were damaged. The Trans-Siberian Railway is a key rail artery in Russia, which has been used to transport weapons and ammunition, including from North Korea. And the Security Service of Ukraine confirmed strikes on the night of November 14th on the port of Novorossiysk, specifically at the oil depot in the Sheskharis transshipment complex, which is the end point of the Transneft pipelines. The terminal is used for receiving, storing, and shipping oil and petroleum products for export, as well as for supplying raw materials to factories in the Krasnodar region. In addition, the strikes hit the area near the military unit of the 1537th Anti-Aircraft Missile Regiment.
We are talking about our attack on the port of Novorossiysk, the largest oil terminal, the biggest oil depot on the Black Sea. This is where the shadow Russian fleet sets out to sea, enters wider waters, operates and earns the money that Russia uses to wage war against Ukraine, replenishing its budget. And as many times as we've said on your broadcasts, it's very easy to check that this is a juicy target and sooner or later something would hit it. And it did. I think now that the defense forces have tested this route, they won't stop anymore. This is a very significant event.
Since the start of the day, the Russian army has stormed Ukrainian positions 176 times along the entire front line. That's according to calculations by the Ukrainian General Staff. What is the situation in the Pokrovsk Direction, where almost a third of all battles have taken place? As well as where, on the southern section of the front, the Russians have intensified their assaults and whether they managed to break through the Ukrainian defenses. We'll tell you more in the next segment.
In thick fog and with armored vehicles. That's how the Russian army once again tried to storm the Oleksandrivka direction, according to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. To support the infantry attacks, the enemy deployed about 24 different armored vehicles, but they failed to hide from the Ukrainian defenders. The defense forces destroyed 2 tanks and 4 Russian armored fighting vehicles. Another tank and 2 armored vehicles were damaged. Russian troops also tried to take advantage of weather conditions unfavorable for drones to amass their forces, so that they could then move out to encircle the Pokrovsk-Myrnohrad agglomeration. According to the Ukrainian General Staff, personnel of Russia's 51st Army were concentrating in the village of Zatishok, Donetsk region. But Ukraine's Special Operations Forces foiled the enemy's plans and attacked with drones the buildings where the occupiers were stationed. Information about Russian troop losses is being clarified. Since the beginning of the day, the Russian army has stormed the positions of the defense forces 176 times along the entire front line, according to calculations by the General Staff of Ukraine. In the Kostiantynivka direction, Ukrainian defenders repelled 31 enemy attacks. Another 24 times the Russians tried to advance toward the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Lyman sector of the front. And on the Oleksandrivka bridgehead, the occupying forces attacked 15 times in the areas of 8 settlements. The situation is also escalating in some southern sectors of the front. This was stated by the Southern Defense Forces. In particular, in the Huliaipole direction, fierce fighting continues with the use of aviation and drones. The Russian army is trying to break through deep into the Ukrainian defenses. Thus, over the past day, the Russians attempted to storm near the village of Yablokove. However, they were unable to push back the Ukrainian defenders.
The enemy continues its assault operations toward Huliaipole. They are trying to push the defense forces from our positions, delivering massive combined fire strikes on our positions. However, they have made no progress. Vladislav Voloshin, spokesperson for the Southern Defense Forces, live on the Wyedny Novini Marathon.
Heavy fighting also continues in the Pokrovsk direction. Since the beginning of the day, according to the Ukrainian General Staff, Russian occupiers have carried out 64 attacks there. There is street fighting going on in the city itself, but analysts say that the fate of the entire agglomeration is not being decided on the streets of Pokrovsk or Mirnorad, but at the so-called Dobropilya salient, which has already been almost cut off and eliminated by Ukrainian forces.
If further successes can be achieved there, if a tactical offensive against Russian forces is possible, then it will be possible to unblock logistics and provide a more prolonged defense of Pokrovsk. As of today, I don't see, let's put it this way, I don't see any intention, yes, from the Pokrovsk command to withdraw. In other words, fighting is ongoing for the city, reinforcements are being sent in, and the so-called sabotage groups, though they're not really sabotage groups, it's Russian infantry that broke into the city, are being eliminated. But unfortunately, they still have the ability to break into the city. From the south, from the southwestern outskirts of Pokrovsk, the enemy continues to infiltrate.
Meanwhile, Russian propagandists are rushing to report yet another round of military victories, but analysts claim these are nothing more than information stunts. Kremlin media are trying to create a sense of victory by reporting on various hotspots, but most often about the capture of Pokrovsk. After all, according to experts, this city has become the embodiment of everything happening on the front, and particularly in the Donetsk region.
Russia has claimed once again. They say they have practically occupied Pokrovsk already, and in just a month or a month and a half, they will be ready to occupy the Donetsk region. None of this corresponds to reality. Here too, everything is obvious. This is, above all, an attempt to demonstrate power, supposed power of the Russian Federation, to show our partners and allies that it is necessary to sit down at the negotiating table, but not with Ukraine, with the Russians, because they are in control of the situation. They are ready to keep fighting, and they have the means for it.
According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the total combat losses of the Russian army since the start of the full-scale invasion have already exceeded 1,156,000 personnel. And just in the past 24 hours, defense forces have eliminated 1,040 Russian occupiers at the front. In addition, Ukrainian fighters destroyed 2 armored vehicles, 35 artillery systems, and eliminated 95 units of enemy automotive equipment.
President Volodymyr Zalinski presented the Gold Star Orders and other state awards to servicemen of Ukraine's security and defense forces, and also handed medals to the families of heroes who were awarded posthumously. The president emphasized that Ukraine is doing everything to become stronger with each passing day, to repel every Russian strike and to avenge the fallen warriors.
Every Ukrainian hero is
a defender not just of a particular sector on the front, not just of a specific Ukrainian city or village. They are defenders of Ukraine's independence, of our entire culture, of all our people. In this war, nothing can be given up or handed over to the enemy because Russia wants everything. That is why we all must equally understand how much we need protection, how important it is to be united, to value and respect the heroism of Ukraine's heroes, our warriors, and to support our army and our state. Because we can only truly be at home in Ukraine, and only Ukraine can truly be a homeland for all of us.
Ukraine has launched mass production of a drone interceptor for Russian Shaheds so that it can start protecting the country's skies as soon as possible. 3 initial manufacturers have received the technology, and another 11 are preparing production lines to strengthen Ukraine's defense capability. This was announced by Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal. The drone on the Octopus platform is a Ukrainian technology for intercepting Shaheds. It was developed by the armed forces and has already been tested in combat. It is capable of operating at any time of day, as well as under jamming conditions and at low altitudes. In the Zaporizhzhia region, state emergency service rescuers are evacuating residents of frontline villages to safer locations. Watch our report to see how they are helping civilians who have lived under Russian shelling for years.
Lyubov Shevchenko's house is not far from the front line. For almost 4 years since the start of the full-scale Russian invasion, she has lived with the constant sounds of explosions and the threat of shelling.
Very hard. It's very, very hard, especially at night. These cluster rockets hit hard and those aerial bombs keep coming. It's very difficult. We hoped it would all end. We stayed until the very last moment. But that's it. We've reached our limit.
Because the situation got worse, the woman and her sister decided to leave their native village. Rescuers from the State Emergency Service came to help them. Early in the morning, a minibus pulled up to Lyubov's house. The rescuers helped load their belongings. The women are heading to Zaporizhzhia. From there, they will go to their relatives in the Poltava region. I have 2 old men on my street.
I have 2 grandpas on my street. There are 2 elderly men left on my street. One is 77 years old, the other is 67. And that's it. There is no one else left on our street.
The woman reached out to the rescuers the day before, says one of the State Emergency Service employees, Yuri Halinko. The very next day, they managed to arrange transportation.
She approached us during the distribution of humanitarian aid. When we were handing out humanitarian aid, a woman came up to us. She asked us to take her and her sister to a safe place, to Zaporizhzhia.
We are ready to evacuate anyone who asks for help.
Anyone who wishes to.
If you want to evacuate from the combat zone, please contact the rescuers, and we will help. We will take you to safe places. Meanwhile, in the frontline areas of Zaporizhzhia region, local authorities have initiated mandatory evacuation of children together with their parents from 5 settlements in the region. At least 20 families are planned to be evacuated to safe regions of Ukraine. Ole Pritikin, Boris Yakovenko from Zaporizhzhia for Freedom TV channel.
Russia's war against Ukraine will remain the biggest challenge for EU citizens. This is evidenced by a recent Eurobarometer survey, a project of regular public opinion polls in the EU conducted under the auspices of the European Commission. And 47% of Europeans consider the war in Ukraine to be the main challenge for the future of the European Union. 41% of respondents named global conflicts in general as such a challenge. In third place, according to EU citizens, are illegal migration, climate change, and environmental issues. France has announced a visit by Volodymyr Zalinski, and according to Reuters, citing the Élysée Palace, the Ukrainian president is expected as soon as next Monday, that is November 17th. It is expected that during Zelensky's visit, his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron will reaffirm France's long-term support and commitment to Ukraine's security. The leaders will also discuss bilateral cooperation in the fields of energy, economy, and defense. In particular, Zelensky and Macron will visit a military airbase in the south of Paris. There, they will review means of protecting Ukraine from Russian aggression. This was reported by one of Macron's advisors. In addition, both presidents will visit the general headquarters of the coalition of willing countries. He asked the North Korean foreign minister to convey to Kim Jong-un that in their bilateral relations, and I quote, everything is going according to plan. End of quote. Indeed, North Korea continues to send cheap labor, soldiers, and weapons to Russia. And Moscow in turn pays its ally with military technologies, equipment, and money. Another batch of manpower from North Korea will soon arrive in the so-called Federation. Yulia Granovskaya will tell you more about this in detail.
Russia plans to bring in 12,000 North Korean migrants to work at enterprises in the Alabuga Special Economic Zone. This will happen in Tatarstan by the end of this year, according to the main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. In Alabuga, they assemble long-range drones of the Shahed-Garan type, which the Russian army uses to attack peaceful cities and critical infrastructure in Ukraine.
To discuss the details of selling labor, a meeting was held at the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs at the end of October between local officials and representatives of the North Korean company Chean Technology Trade Company, which is responsible for recruiting and selecting Korean workers. The imported labor force is being promised about $2.50 US per hour, and workers' shifts will last at least 12 hours. Main Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine on Telegram.
But the aggressor country intends to use not only labor from North Korea. Much more important for Moscow is Pyongyang's willingness to continue supplying soldiers to participate in Russia's war against Ukraine. Due to colossal losses at the front, the Russian command is actively recruiting military personnel from the DPRK for offensive operations. They are in particular involved in adjusting Russian strikes on the positions of Ukraine's defense forces.
From the territory of the Kursk region, these units are conducting reconnaissance activities. Using unmanned aerial vehicles, they identify the locations of the Ukrainian armed forces and assist in adjusting fire on the positions of Ukrainian units in the Sumy region. Ukraine's defense forces have intercepted communications between North Korean UAV operators and Russian army personnel. North Korean UAV operators were adjusting the fire of multiple launch rocket systems on the positions of Ukrainian troops. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram.
North Korea has sent military construction workers to Russia to restore infrastructure and sappers for demining, according to South Korea's National Intelligence Service.
Currently, more than 10,000 North Korean military personnel are stationed near the Russian-Ukrainian border. They are carrying out security tasks. Over 1,000 sappers are involved in demining operations. More than 5,000 construction workers have been gradually transferred to Russia since September, and they are expected to be assigned to infrastructure restoration, from a publication in The Choice on Daily.
In 2024, Putin and Kim Jong-un signed a strategic partnership agreement which includes the Mutual Defense Pact. Based on this agreement, North Korea sent more than 10,000 troops to Russia. In exchange, it received fuel, food, money, and most importantly, military technology. In January 2025, Ukrainian defense forces captured the first North Korean soldiers in the Kursk region. But Pyongyang publicly acknowledged the participation of its military in Russia's war against Ukraine only in April. Now, state propaganda in North Korea is actively working to create a new cult. In North Korea, they have already managed to open 2 so-called victory museums.
By glorifying the soldiers sent to Russia, Kim Jong-un presents their presence there as an unprecedented achievement. Apparently, he intends to fabricate a new victory myth related to the liberation of Kursk, according to a publication in The Choice on Daily.
The Japanese news agency Kyodo News reports that about 70% of the ammunition used by the Kremlin in the war against Ukraine is produced in North Korea. Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Pyongyang has sent its ally about 6.5 million shells. In turn, according to the assessment of South Korea's National Intelligence Service, the DPRK, with the help of the Russian Federation, has made significant progress in the development of nuclear weapons, short-range missiles, unmanned aerial vehicles, as well as conventional arms. And this fact poses a serious security threat in the region, experts believe.